What is good, everyone? Welcome to the channel, and today is my comeuppance. Today I'm going to admit to faults in my thinking, prejudices I've held, things that I thought I knew about Japan that I got really wrong. Let's get into it. Now, before we get started, we just had Tanabata, or the Star Festival in Japan, which is July 7th. And during Tanabata, you make a wish by writing a wish on a small piece of paper and affixing it to a tree. Well, if you missed Tanabata, you have a second chance right now. Make a wish and hit the like button. And if you want your wish to come true, be sure you hit the subscribe button as well. With that out of the way, let's get into the topic. So there are a few things that I believed about Japan that turned out really to not be true. I would even call them prejudices I held based on misinformation and my own inclination to, I guess, believe poorly of Japanese society in some respects. Now, some of these you may have held yourself, some of these you may still hold, and this might be of interest to you, but there might be a few that you might actually disagree with because of your own personal experience. Let's find out. The first type of thinking about Japanese society or prejudice that I had that I've changed my mind about is I had this idea that Japan or the Japanese really didn't like nature, and that everything was all about trying to control the natural world, and that we had a situation of a corrupt construction industry in Japan that just wanted to pour concrete on everything, build dams in the middle of nowhere that weren't necessary, concrete hillsides with retaining walls, and basically make the countryside more ugly than it needed to be. That's what I believed, and I've been around other foreigners in Japan who had the same idea about it. I was very much influenced by some of the first people I met who complained incessantly about what they felt were unnecessary construction projects. And frankly, every time I go hiking in the mountains, I'm bound to come across a dam that seems like it's in the middle of nowhere and there's barely a trickle of water coming out of it. And it seemed to basically prove this point that, well, Japan is just putting concrete everywhere because they want to, and they don't really care about destroying nature. But actually, this is a perfect point to be making this week, having just seen the horrible footage of the giant mudslide in Atami. Atami is a town that is in Shizuoka Prefecture, Izu Peninsula. I've been there. I actually recognized the place where the mudslide happened. It was terrible, knocking out cars, houses collapsed, power lines went down, and there were people who were injured and killed in it. And that's why Japan does all that concreting, making those retaining walls, putting up dams. Yeah, sure, when I hiked past those dams in November or something in the dry season, there was a trickle of water. But right about now, we've had 2 weeks of pretty much incessant rain. This is my first chance to get out filming in a while. And, well, I bet those dams are flowing pretty good right now. I'm just not there to see it. So, who am I to say that the Japanese construction industry shouldn't be building those walls to retain hillsides, or to build those dams to try to control the flow of water? I'm not an expert on those things, and quite frankly, the people who influenced me early on are not experts in those things either. So I've changed my mind. If Japan wants to do whatever they can to try to protect the communities that are around hillsides, which is pretty much everywhere in Japan, more power to them. If I have to look at a dam while I'm out hiking, so what? I'm not going to begrudge them that attempt to protect the communities that lie below those hillsides. So that's the first prejudice that I've changed my mind about. The second is something that's probably going to surprise a lot of people. And some people are probably going to come back at me saying, well, no, I've had horrible personal experiences. Just because you have not had horrible personal experiences doesn't mean it's not true. That being said, I think I have some pretty good information to indicate that actually Japanese bureaucracy, government bureaucracy, isn't that bad at all. Everyone loves to hate on bureaucracy, and Japanese bureaucracy is kind of taken on a image of being incredibly slow, incredibly inefficient, sort of faceless and unfriendly, but that has not been my experience, and I can talk about each individual level, starting at the local level. Every time I've gone into a local government office to take care of some business, whether it was to register as a business or, register my residence in that town or city, the staff have been incredibly efficient, very polite. It never takes more than one trip there. I might have to pay 300 yen on occasion for a official piece of paper, but that's $3, so that's not a big deal. And typically it's taken 30 to 45 minutes. It's not a big deal unless there's, other people waiting in front of me, and that's just the nature of dealing with an office of any type. No real horror stories to speak of. And let's move up to the next level, paying taxes. When I've gone to pay taxes, the staff have been incredibly helpful and incredibly knowledgeable. I've never had a tax official who just didn't know what to do with my tax information. They know what they're doing and are very efficient in processing you through that, the stages of reporting taxes. So to continue on up the ladder, let's talk about immigration. I'm sure some people out there have horror stories when it comes to immigration, but personally, I've not had any particular issues, and there was one time I had a problem, but it was because I forgot one piece of paperwork myself, so it was my fault, and I was all worried. I'm thinking, oh man, I'm gonna have to come back here and take a number and stand in line again. And immigration in Yokohama is pretty far from where I live and work, so it's a bit of a chore to go out there. But they were very friendly and explained, here's an envelope with our address on it. Go get that form with your case number on it and send it in to us, and we will just put it with your file and take care of it that way. You don't have to come back in. And then they ended up mailing me what I needed for my immigration status when it was all said and done, so I didn't even have to go back for that. Granted, where I've lived, Yokohama and elsewhere, immigration might be a little bit easier than Tokyo, for example, but I've never lived in Tokyo, so I don't have that experience. I have a hunch it is more difficult there because there's a lot more foreigners in Tokyo. But here's the kicker. Here's the situation where I really changed my mind and reversed my prejudice against Japanese government bureaucracy. And that is my experience of getting a spousal visa to Japan. Now, I had been through the horrible, terrible experience of getting a green card for my wife when we moved to the States. Multiple trips to the embassy, an interview, another trip to Tokyo to get a health check at a embassy-approved hospital. Tons of paperwork, about $2,000 spent, and I understand it's a lot more expensive now than it was back then, so more like $3-4 grand to get a green card. So expensive, time-consuming, pain in the butt. When I applied for a spousal visa to Japan while we were in the States, on Friday I sent off 2 sheets of paper that I had filled out myself, my application, another sheet which was a letter of guarantee from my wife, and a self-addressed stamped envelope, and my passport. Sent out on Friday afternoon. On Tuesday, I received my self-addressed stamped envelope in the mail. Inside it was my passport with my brand new spousal visa in it. The cost, the price of the mailing. The time it took, 1 business day. Did I have to go anywhere except to the post office? Not at all. It was crazy easy, especially compared to the nightmare that is the American system. So that was it. After that experience, I was thinking, I really can't ever slag off the Japanese government bureaucracy ever again. Actually, to be honest, it's the private sector where you often run into more difficult paperwork and nonsense, like banking or the insurance industry, not the government offices. Go figure. So, the third and final prejudice that I overcame that is really important for me to mention is because it's in my own field, education. I think I came to Japan with this idea, and it was again fortified by contact with other sort of cynical, disgruntled foreigners. But I had this idea in my head that the Japanese didn't have, or Japanese students rather, didn't have much in the way of opinions or critical thinking ability. And over my experience at the university, I've found that is simply, absolutely, completely not the case. It does take a certain environment to encourage students to begin sharing their opinions and discussing, establishing criteria, deciding on definitions for terms, all the usual things that are involved with critical thinking and examining different issues. But once given the right environment to do so, they had no trouble at all. I mean, of course, some are better than others. That's with any sort of thinking skill. But of course, abilities vary anywhere. Like, not everyone is great at critical thinking in the States, obviously. So I just, over time, came to realize it was completely false, this idea that critical thinking was not something. I mean, you can kind of fall into that trap because there's so much rote memorization in the Japanese education system, but that doesn't mean they don't have their own opinions. That doesn't mean they all think in lockstep. That doesn't mean that they can't critically analyze different issues, have discussions about ideas. And my time teaching at my university has clearly proven that. I've done a complete 180 on that, and I have the utmost respect and faith in my students to be able to form their own opinions, defend their ideas, and, well, critically analyze what they believe or have always thought to be true. All right. So those are my 3 prejudices that I overcame and changed my mind about Japan. How do you feel about those 3 that I mentioned? Do you have any prejudices or misthoughts of your own that you overcame, or do you disagree with any of the ones I talked about? Let us know in the comments below. And again, if you haven't made your wish yet, make a wish, hit the like button, and if you subscribe as well, it will most certainly come true. Thank you so much for watching this video. Look for my other content, new video every single Friday about Japan, society, life, and culture. Thank you so much for watching this one, and I'll see you next week. Peace.